morning. I want to call our meeting of the Tennessee Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers to order. I want to ask Miss Lisa Mosby if you would call our roll, please.
Wayne Hinkle.
Here.
Tony Highsmith.
Here.
Clark McKinney.
Here.
W.T. Patterson.
Here.
Jane Gray Sowell. Robert Starkey.
Here.
Anita Taylor. Here. Mr. President, everybody's present except for Jane Gray Sowell.
Okay, and I believe she is on her way.
She is.
Okay. All right. Next item on our agenda is we need to adopt our agenda for today's meeting.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt today's agenda as presented. It's been circulated.
We have a motion by Mr. Highsmith to adopt the agenda as printed, seconded by Ms. Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next, we need to review the minutes of the October 9 board meeting. We'll give you a few minutes to look over those. Best I can without my glasses. Chair will entertain a motion to adopt the minutes of October 9.
Make a motion. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Starkey, seconded by Mr. Patterson, to adopt or approve the minutes of October 9, 2012 board meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item is our legal report from Mr. Benton McDonough, our Assistant General Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Good morning.
Morning. Number one is case 2012015-721. On January 25th, 2012, a field representative conducted a routine inspection of the respondent establishment. The establishment contained a place to conduct human and pet cremations in the same building. However, the crematories were located in separate locations, within the building with a separate entrance to the crematories and separate areas for family viewing. There was no signage on the crematories denoting the business. Furthermore, the respondent lacked a separate address and phone number for the two businesses. Displays for the pet cremations could be seen inside the human business, and documents for the two businesses were kept in the same human business, but in separate filing cabinets. The respondent provided two brochures for pet cremations that were available inside the human business, and the company website for pet cremations ties directly to the human business with the same address, telephone number, same business history, photographs, owners, and products. In response, the respondent offers the following remedies. One, request change of name from the current establishment name from the board. Establish a new telephone number to be used solely for the human crematory. Move human cremation files to a different room. Remove stone memorials from front of the building. Update website removing any ties to the human crematory. Put signage on each door identifying each room, each individual business, and request the Postal Service to add a new mailing address for each business. Respondent does not have any material that advertises human crematory, and they only cremate directly for the funeral homes and do not offer services to the public. Every type of printed public material only references pet cremation with the exception of the website's About Us section. Despite the name issues, respondent states that they run two companies as separate businesses. We found two prior closed complaints, and we're recommending a letter of instruction setting out suggestions provided by the respondent on how to remedy the violations in this case.
This would be the same instructions as we've given those with similar circumstances in the past.
That's correct.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Hinkle to accept council's recommendation, seconded by Mr. Starkey. Any further discussion?
Question. Under the history, has that not already been done at least once? Did they receive a letter of instruction giving?
I think it has, and I think that they're agreeing that that's something that they want to do, so that they're willing to do. So I thought that we would send one more letter in this case and then send someone back to make sure that they follow through on that.
Mr. Highsmith, I think the letter of instruction was probably sent in September of 2011, and the field representative was held January 25th. So it just barely, 90 days, it just barely expired.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Number 2 is case 2012019321, and number 3 is case 2012019322. This case was originally open in burial services. However, the case was closed against the pre-need sales agent and reopened against the funeral directors and embalmers license. On February 27, 2012, an auditor with burial services conducted a routine audit of the respondent establishment. First, there's no record that the 2010 establishment pre-need funeral funds report on irrevocable and revocable contracts was received in burial services. 2009, it was determined that the statistics reported in Section 5 of the 2009 establishment pre-need funeral funds report was incorrect, and the number of insurance pre-need contracts written during 2009 was reported as 6. However, there were only 5 documented pre-need contracts on the Investors Heritage Insurance listing. Furthermore, there were 11 service pre-need contracts reported on line D, but the records showed only that 5 were serviced, and this was a repeat finding in this case. As for required documentation, during the review of the funeral home files, there's evidence of continued insufficient documentation in the pre-need contract files. It was noted that of the 4 files that did not contain the enrollment contract application form, which shows the beneficiary information, contract amount, and application date, the following was shown. George Orr, one of the decedents, no evidence of enrollment form was presented during the exam, and Laura Orr, active file, and no evidence that enrollment form and contract is in the file. As for exam fees, the funeral home pre-need examination was performed on August 9, 2010, and as of the date of the audit report, burial services has yet to receive a $300 exam fee. We did not receive any response from the respondent in this case, and we would like to note that the respondent allowed both his funeral director's license and his embalmer's license to expire on June 30th, 2012. We have a record of history of several complaints, and we're recommending a consent order stating that the respondent agrees not to reapply for his funeral director's license or his embalmer's license for 3 years from the date of the consent order. So, and I would note that the reason that we brought this complaint before the board, and it deals specifically with pre-need issues, is the fact that there is a section in the statutes that allows the board to discipline a funeral director or embalmer for violations of any pre-need statute or rule.
Mr. Gribble, if he is not allowed to apply for a license for 3 years, his license would expire and he'd have to start from the very beginning. He could not pay a late fee or penalty, anything like that, to reinstate.
He is beyond the time to pay his late fee and reinstate now, so his license are expired. And council and I had the discussion about, there's no license to revoke because they're currently expired. And he's not attempting to renew those licenses or reinstate those licenses at this point. I do have knowledge he recently sold his business. So that's why council is recommending to you today his recommendation. It addresses the issue, it puts something on the record, it puts something in the file. You could close a complaint and tell us to flag it, but in reality, flagging it is not as good as what this is here.
What happens if he doesn't agree to not reapply for 3 years?
I guess you can come back and make a decision as to what to do.
Yeah, we can always bring it back before the board, or I think that would be probably the.
And if he reapplies, it would not be administratively approved. It'd have to come before this board for approval, and this information would be cited at that time.
That's correct.
I move to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Highsmith to accept council's recommendation, second by Mr. Hinkle. Any further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Number 4 is case 2012005711. This case was originally presented on July 10th, 2012. The owner of the establishment has since passed away and the establishment has since been sold. On February 2nd, 2012, a field representative conducted a routine inspection of the respondent establishment. During the inspection, it was determined that the respondent failed to provide a copy of the latest inspection report and license for the crematory utilized by this establishment. The current funeral director's licenses for 2 employees were not available for inspection. The current embalmer's license for 1 individual was not available for inspection. And the respondent failed to provide a copy of the casket price list, general price list, outer burial container price list, completed copies of the statement of funeral goods and services selected, and a blank copy of the statement of funeral goods and services selected for the inspection. The respondent's signage did not reflect the exact name listed on the establishment application approved by the board, nor did the respondent apply for a name change. Respondent failed to respond to the complaint upon receiving notice that a complaint was opened against the establishment. No response was received from the respondent, and we found a history of 1 closed complaint with similar violations. And at that time, we recommended a consent order with a $750 civil penalty and authorization for a hearing. The board determined that the proper course of action was a consent order with a $750 civil penalty plus $250 for no response, making a total civil penalty of $1,000 and authorization for a hearing. And we are now recommending that this complaint be closed as the previous owner has passed away and the establishment is under new ownership.
Does that mean the fine is forgiven?
I don't think it's forgiven, but probably the proper course of action would be to close this case because it's under new ownership.
And in the other person's passed away, so.
Right, that's correct.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Taylor to accept council's recommendation, seconded by Mr. Starkey. Any further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
And I'd like to point out the next two complaints are against the same establishment. So,
Number 4,
yes.
5, and 6.
4, 5, and 6. Yeah. Number 5 is case 201-0030-461. This case, which was originally presented on November 9th, 2010. The owner of the establishment has since passed away and the establishment has since been closed. During a routine examination, the field representative found that a former apprentice was engaged in the direction of funerals while lacking a valid license. The former apprentice oversaw the services held at the church and then oversaw the burial shortly thereafter. During these services, the respondent wore a name tag identifying them as an employee/funeral director of the establishment. When the field representative confronted the individual, they admitted to not being properly licensed and stated that "you caught me." This individual admitted to the field representative that the owner of the establishment was aware that they were unlicensed. However, they took the risk to the expense of hiring a licensed employee. No licensed funeral directors were present at either service. In response, respondent states that they were fully aware that each service was required to have a licensed funeral director present. Respondent states that they accept full responsibility due to the fact that the owner was not present due to the unexpected illness. It was too late to call any other licensed director at that time, and the respondent does not recall telling a funeral representative that the establishment took a chance with an unlicensed funeral director due to the cost of hiring a licensed director. We found one prior pre-need complaint not related. Originally, the board agreed to a consent order with a $1,000 civil penalty and authorization for a hearing. However, we are now recommending that this case be closed due to the death of the previous owner and the fact that the establishment is under new ownership.
And also might point out that the individual that was involved in that has already signed the consent order to pay the civil penalty. This case here is against the establishment.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Hinkle to accept council's recommendation, second by Mr. Patterson. Any further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Number 6 is case 20110000741. This case was originally presented on April 12, 2011. However, the owner of the establishment has passed away and the establishment has since been sold. During a routine inspection, the following violations were found to exist. The latest inspection report for the crematory used by this establishment was not available for inspection. The establishment only had 3 cremations during 2010. In these 3 instances, none of the files contained a cremation authorization permit. The current license for one embalmer was not available for inspection. No casket price list could be produced for inspection. In the casket selection room, there were 25 caskets being offered to the consumer with no casket price list available for price comparison. On the general price list, the casket range on the low end was from $1,100 to high end of $9,500 with no casket price list comparison. On the general price list, the high end range for immediate burial was $2,895 with no casket price list comparison. On the general price list, immediate burial with cloth covered wood casket was listed for $2,895 with no casket price list comparison. On the general price list, direct cremation high end range was $3,990 with no casket price list for comparison. Also on the general price list, direct cremation with heavy cardboard container was listed as $3,995 with no casket price list comparison. On the statement of funeral goods and services selected, on the files selected for review, 4 did not have the description of merchandise chosen for the pricing. On the file selected for review, 4 of the files did not have the description of merchandise chosen, or the pricing is incorrect. And as for the preparation room, the field representative found soiled linen piled on the table, soiled gloves discarded on the table, a trash can with trash uncovered, embalming fluid standing in the machine with nobody present for need of embalming. Appearance of the preparation room was unsanitary and in need of a general cleaning. And we received no response in this case, and we found a history of 1 open complaint with TCA violations and 3 closed complaints not related. Originally, the board agreed to a consent order with a $2,500 civil penalty and authorization for a hearing, and at this time we're recommending that this case be closed due to the death of the previous owner and the fact that the establishment is under new ownership.
Move we accept council's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Highsmith to accept council's recommendation, second by Mr. Hinkle. Any further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Number 7 is case 2012019-101. On August 24th, 2012, the board received a complaint regarding improper activity at the respondent establishment. The complainant states that a 3-stack cooler is being utilized in a barn located in a local cemetery to store unembalmed remains until an affiliated crematory becomes available for cremating. Unlicensed personnel are waiting on families and carrying out funeral services with no licensed funeral director present. Unlicensed personnel are embalming remains without a licensed embalmer on the premises, and since the establishment burned down, temporary facilities are being used, including a makeshift preparation room, and unembalmed remains are also kept at the location for days if there is no room in the 3-stack cooler. Respondent states that the 3-stack cooler is the only one they were able to salvage from the fire that destroyed their previous establishment, and it is under video surveillance with a lock on the door. As for the unlicensed personnel, the respondent states that the only time unlicensed employees wait on families is if the individual is an apprentice with a licensed funeral director present. As for embalmings carried out by unlicensed personnel, the respondent states that this is a false allegation, as the complainant used to embalm bodies for the respondent, but that individual always had a licensed embalmer present. As for the makeshift preparation room, the respondent states that the room is used for dressing, cosmetics, hair preparation prior to casketing. There is no embalming equipment present in the room, and it is clearly marked employees only. As for keeping bodies in the establishment when the cooler is full, respondent states that this does happen on occasion and the bodies are moved as soon as space becomes available. Finally, the respondent states that the complainant made these complaints on the first business day following his dismissal from employment by the respondent. The complainant then responded to the respondent's initial response, and the complainant states that there was no video surveillance, nor was there any lock placed on the cooler until after the complainant was dismissed from employment. The issue of unlicensed personnel being utilized under licensed supervision was practiced very loosely by the respondent. And as for the embalming room, respondent states that there were embalming chemicals, equipment, and instruments utilized in a room that was only to be used for dressing, cosmetics, and hair preparation. Furthermore, complainant states that he witnessed a funeral director, embalmer, apprentice, surface embalm a fetus with arterial chemicals and instruments while a licensed embalmer was not present. We found a history of 1 open complaint and 8 closed complaints, and at this time we're recommending that this case be closed unless the complainant can provide additional proof.
And up until now, there's not been any proof submitted other than just allegations.
Just allegations at this time.
Has there been a field inspector go out to this respondent place of business?
There's been one there within the very recent past, on more than one occasion. Matter of fact, I know at least once, and I was almost certain he's been there at least 2 times in the last few months.
Did he confirm that the cooler was located in a barn? Is that listed in the report you got?
I just know that I think the respondent admitted to that in this case, but I don't know of any of our field representatives confirming that.
As I recall, what happened, Mr. Highsmith, after the building burned where the establishment was, and they salvaged this cooler, and they moved it to a cemetery where now there is a licensed crematory at. But the cooler was there to the cemetery, on the cemetery property, is my understanding, for a period of time prior to the crematory being licensed at that location.
just not comfortable with housing, the lack of vertical housing deceased human beings are. And I realize this individual's had a fire and other circumstances involved there, but you can find somewhere to put a cooler inside somebody's barn.
I wonder if there's a barn or a shed at the cemetery or closed-in shed or something. Do we know about that from the inspection?
That they didn't specify. Did they say anything in the inspection?
I have not heard the word, from the field representative, I've not heard the word barn used at any time, but that's what the word the complainant uses. I have seen photographs and don't recall seeing anything that would be similar to what I would define as a barn.
Would a letter of warning be, or would that not be appropriate since there's no proof of anything?
I don't feel like we have enough proof at this time to.
Warn somebody about doing something they might not have been doing.
Right.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hinkle to accept council's recommendation with multiple seconds. We'll say Ms. Taylor. Any further questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Number 8 is case 2012019-241. On August 20th, 2012, the board received a complaint stating that an advertisement in the local newspaper failed to denote that the owners pictured in the advertisement were unlicensed personnel. Respondent states that the original advertisement that they provided to the newspaper did contain an asterisk placed beside the names of the owners who are unlicensed personnel in the funeral establishment. The advertising representative for the local newspaper provided a letter stating that the original advertisement did in fact denote that the owners were unlicensed personnel. However, the newspaper failed to include that information in the advertisement, and it was not the fault of the respondent. We found a history of 1 closed complaint and 2 open complaints, and we're recommending that this case be dismissed.
Move to accept council's recommendation.
We have a motion by Mr. Highsmith to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Multiple seconds again. Second by Mr. Patterson. Any further questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Number 9 is case 2012019-391. The complainant in this case is a competitor of the respondent establishment. Complainant received a phone call from the local Alive Hospice regarding an individual who had just passed away. The complainant and an assistant went to the hospice to meet with the family and obtain permission to embalm the decedent. The family met with the complainant and discussed funeral arrangements, including that they wanted the decedent buried on the grounds of the respondent establishment. The complainant contacted the respondent and informed them of the family's wishes that their loved one be buried on the premises and set up a meeting between the respondent and the family for that afternoon. As the complainant was leaving work later that afternoon, he received a message from an employee of the respondent establishment informing him that the family wished to transfer final arrangements to the respondent establishment. The complainant contacted the family and the respondent and found that the respondent promised to provide funeral services and burial for the cost of the insurance policy the family had for $10,000. The complainant alleges that the respondent quoted a price originally of $14,000 for funeral and burial initially, but then called in 2 employees who were not licensed funeral directors to negotiate with the family and come to the cost of $10,000. The complainant states that the cost they quoted for the funeral alone would be in excess of $8,000 and that the cost of the burial at the respondent establishment would have put the price in excess of $10,000. So the family decided to use the services of the respondent for $10,000. The complainant believes that the respondent took advantage of the family at a time of need and used unlicensed personnel to make final arrangements. The respondent believes that they did nothing wrong or unethical, as the complainant alleges. Respondent states that the family was quoted over $8,000 for funeral services at the complainant's establishment, and the cost of burial with opening and closing alone would have put the cost over $10,000. Also, respondent states that an unlicensed employee is aware of the law and did not quote the family a price at the respondent establishment, but contacted a licensed funeral director to discuss what could be done for the family at this time. Respondent manager told the employee that they could work with the family and cover all of the final arrangements for $10,000. The manager asked the employee to call the other manager who had put in his 1 month notice at that point and to ask him to assist with the family. The other manager told the employee to ask the family to come back the next day so that they could meet with the licensed funeral director. The employee informed the respondent that the family had never signed a contract with the complainant's establishment. On a side note, the complainant responded by providing a copy of the signed statement of funeral goods and services selected dated August 20th, 2012 between the decedent's family and the complainant. We found a history of 2 closed complaints and 1 open complaint, and we're recommending a consent order with a $1,000 civil penalty and authorization for a hearing.
Counsel, is the complainant and the respondent 2 different people,
Yes,
2 different establishments?
2 different establishments. The complainant is the one that originally met with the family and made final arrangements with the family, and then the respondent is the establishment that was going to provide burial services initially, and then the family decided that they would work with them to provide burial and funeral services. The respondent has a funeral home and cemetery on their grounds.
Did have a signed contract.
It does appear so.
Yeah, according to this. That's providing a copy of the sign.
And does it appear that the respondent undercut the complainant's price? Or possibly the same services? In other words, he bid on it?
Well, the complainant initially provided a quote of a little over $8,000, and then for the burial, I think it would have been, I think for the opening and closing, it would have been over $2,000 for that, and so they informed the family that if they moved everything over to that establishment, then they could do it for $14,000, and then the decedent's widow stated that she could not afford $14,000, so that's when they offered $10,000 just for the cost of the policy that they had. And I think the concern that I had in the complaint was the fact that it appeared that they were using unlicensed personnel to negotiate the final price with the family, and that's why we settled on the $1,000 civil penalty in this case in the consent order.
But the respondent quoted a price of $14,000, so then the other funeral home, the complaint said 10, so then the respondent came down to the 10. Is that kind of
No, I think they just, the woman said the widow said all that she could afford was the $10,000 policy, and so they decided that they would provide all the services for the $10,000. But they did initially quote her at $14,000.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
second?
We have a motion by Ms. Taylor to accept council's recommendation and a second by Mr. Starkey. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Number 10 is case 20120200381. The complainant made a call to the respondent establishment regarding a loved one who had just passed away. Complainant states that he was quoted $995 by an unlicensed employee when the complainant states that he told the employee that the new funeral home in town could provide the same services for $695 and asked to speak to the funeral director in charge. Complainant was passed to the owner of the establishment, who quoted him $450 and stated that he was not a licensed funeral director either. The owner explained that the licensed funeral directors are only on site when a funeral is scheduled to take place, and the complainant is concerned that there is no licensed funeral director on site managing the respondent, nor is there any funeral director present when unlicensed personnel quote prices. The respondent states that they always have at least one of 4 licensed funeral directors and one of 3 licensed embalmers present to provide services to the public at all times. The respondent states that the complainant called and asked about the price of a direct cremation at the establishment, and the employee answering the phone quoted the complainant at $995. The employee states that the complainant told him that that price was pretty high, considering the new funeral home in town could do the same exact thing while supplying an urn and some other stuff for $475. Respondent states that he felt like this matter should be addressed with the owner of the establishment and asked the complainant to hold. He states that the individual never asked to speak to a licensed funeral director, and the owner is an apprentice funeral director and embalmer. The owner then took over and stated that their policy is to meet a competitor's price with an additional 5% off, which would bring the price down to $450 that the respondent could provide. Respondent states that the complainant never asked to speak to a licensed funeral director, and that they would have been more than happy to allow the complainant to speak to a licensed funeral director had he actually asked to do so. Respondent asked if the complainant had a death in the family, and the complainant informed him that this was so, but the complainant hung up once the respondent asked for their name. We found a history of 1 closed complaint and 2 open complaints, and we're recommending that this case be dismissed.
Make a motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Starkey and a second by Mr. Hinkle to accept council's recommendation. Any further questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Number 11 is case 2012015-851. This complaint was originally presented at the October meeting, and the board decided against council's recommendation of a $1,000 civil penalty and increase the civil penalty to $3,000. The respondent stated that he cannot pay the $3,000 civil penalty, but requests that the penalty be decreased. Again, council requests that the board seriously consider a civil penalty of $1,000 in determining the proper civil penalty to impose. Rule 0660-08-.013A requires the board consider whether the amount imposed will be a substantial economic deterrent to the violator. It is my belief that a civil penalty of $1,000 would be a significant deterrent, whereas a civil penalty of $3,000 would act less as a deterrent and would more likely lead to the demise of this establishment. Therefore, we ask that the board reconsider the initial implementation of the $3,000 civil penalty, and I'll present the case as it was originally presented last month. On February 8th, 2012, a field representative conducted a routine inspection of the respondent establishment. The FTC required price range of caskets on the general price list was incorrect when compared to the price of caskets on the casket price list. The FTC required immediate burial price range was incorrect on the general price list when compared to the price of caskets on the casket price list. The immediate burial with Victory West cloth covered casket was incorrect because the Victory West cloth covered casket was not offered for sale and listed on the casket price list. As for the statement of funeral goods and services selected, the statement of funeral goods and services selected failed to provide a description of services selected, failed to provide a description of merchandise selected, and failed to provide a reason for embalming when an embalming fee was charged. Cremations. During the inspection, it was determined that the respondent conducted approximately 8 cremations for 2011 and none for the year of 2012. Upon inspecting the 8 cremation authorization forms for 2011, it was determined that in 3 of the forms, the owner, who is not a licensed funeral director, signed the cremation authorization forms as if they were a licensed funeral director. Business cards, the respondent provided a business card which included the name of 3 individuals, 2 of which were the owners who were not licensed funeral directors or embalmers, and gave no indication that they were unlicensed individuals. The crematory utilized, respondent failed to provide a copy of the latest inspection report or current license of the crematory utilized by the establishment. As for the 3 cremation authorization forms, they lacked a signature of a licensed funeral director. The funeral director, in response, the funeral director of record responded on behalf of the respondent. The respondent admits to the violations. However, they state that the 3 cremation authorization forms were found to contain the signature of the unlicensed funeral homeowner, were changed by the owner of the crematorium after the paperwork had been sent from the respondent. The respondent provided a copy of the cremation authorization forms that were allegedly changed and a copy of the funeral homeowner's real signature. However, it is unclear whether the signature was forged or whether the respondent funeral homeowner actually signed the document while not a licensed funeral director. We found a history of 4 prior closed complaints, one of those related, and we're recommending a consent order with a $1,000 civil penalty and authorization for a hearing.
In this case, do we have to have a motion to reconsider or not? Since it was previously decided. Good question, huh?
Not before, but it might be appropriate. I'm not sure. Since it's, yeah, if you want to do it to be safe, that might be the safest thing.
Okay.
There'd be nothing wrong with doing a motion to reconsider.
Okay.
See whether that passes or not.
Chair will entertain a motion to reconsider this again.
Hear this again.
Second.
Okay, have a motion by Mr. Hinkle, seconded by Ms. Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. What is it? What size firm is this? Do you know?
It's extremely small, but we'll give you some definite numbers here in just a second. During 2011, they reported doing 33 funerals, and 8 of those 33 were cremations.
Okay.
On the inspection on February the 8th, they had done 2 calls year to date at that time, and 0 were cremations.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Hinkle to accept council's recommendation, second by Ms. Taylor. Any further questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. You had a light.
What's that?
You had a light report for us today.
I believe the remainder of the reports from here on out will be shorter.
Don't get the wrong number.
Next on our
Get 17.
agenda is administrative matters. Mr. Robert Gribble.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first thing I have for you to view is the financial recount for fiscal year July 1, 2011 through June 30th, 2012. This financial data was provided by the Assistant Commissioner's Office for Regulatory Boards to us on November the 1st. You'll note that the beginning balance July 1st, 2011 to the board was $327,720. Net revenue or earnings for the fiscal year was $1,001,760, which made total funds available in the amount of $1,329,480. Expenditures for the year, $370,851. And then we have cost backs, which are also expenditures, and it would be in addition, this amount's in addition to the $371,000. Cost backs are cost allocation charged to the board from administration and investigations. That amount was $145,956, which made our total expenditures, including cost backs, of $516,806, which leaves a reserve balance on July the 1st, 2012 for the board of $812,674. And as we had discussed earlier, that's why you're considering the rulemaking hearing tomorrow to decrease fees for funeral director and embalmers license from $275 every 2 years to $235. This page, along with a comparative, a 4-year comparative, and a detailed information about the cost backs and how those cost backs are figured, all that information and data was emailed to you yesterday, but it went to, because I thought that was something you probably want to save and hold on to, and it's more conducive to send it to you in an email than it was to just present it by itself today on the iPad. The next thing is the licensee report. It's a report of licenses administratively approved by the executive director pursuant to the board's authority. These licenses were approved for the period of October 9, 2012 through November 12, 2012. Have one new establishment, some ownership changes, some ownership and name changes, and location changes as well. And many times when it's an ownership and name change, it may just be as simple as leaving the incorporate off at the end of it. It's where the business has been sold, the new company is operating under a different corporation or a different LLC, and then you have the individuals who were approved there as well. There were no closed establishments since the last board meeting. Disciplinary action report. The report of consent orders administratively accepted and approved by the executive director pursuant to the board's authority for the period of October 9, 2012 through November 12, 2012. And you'll see that that's 9 consent orders with civil penalties totaling $7,250. And the last report is the complaint report, and you will notice that there are 109 open complaints before the board at this time. Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to accept the executive director's report?
Motion to accept.
We have a motion by Mr. Hinkle and a second by Ms. Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Let's see, trying to get back to where we're at here. I believe we have, next on our agenda is approval of this funeral director's license. Mr. Gribble?
It's for a funeral director and embalmer by reciprocity.
All right.
Mr. Todd Van Beck.
And Mr. Van Beck, if you would come to the witness stand.
Mr. President, the reason Mr. Van Beck is before you today is because of his applications, and the reason I could not administratively review and approve the applications because of TCA 62-5-311B, which has to do with reciprocity.
All right. Thank you for being here. Just give us a few minutes to look over all these documents that they've got for us.
While you're looking at those, Mr. President, I'll point out to you, Mr. Van Beck is currently licensed in the state of Georgia. He was originally issued a license there on August the 28th, 2007, and the expiration date for those licenses are March 31, 2014. He was issued licenses as general director and Embalmer both in the state of Alabama, and those are current. They were issued July the 27th, 2011, and they expire on September 30th, 2013.
If you would, Mr. Van Beck, give us a little bit of your background, if you would.
How far do you want to go back?
How about when?
I don't want to abuse your schedule.
That's all right. Okay, we got plenty of time. You started in funeral service when?
In 1966.
Okay.
And I went to mortuary school in Boston, and that was before the days of the associate's degree. I did fairly well, and 35 years later ended up president of that school. And so I ran several mortuary colleges over the years in Cincinnati, Boston, and Houston, Texas. Managed several funeral homes, and then owned a couple funeral homes over the years. But then about 3 years ago, I got married after a 20-year bachelorhood, and my wife and I decided we were going to buy a place. And of course, we found that more difficult than what our dream was, and so I had a good buddy, Ralph Turner, who owned A.S. Turner & Son in Atlanta, and he offered me a position. And so I was licensed in Texas, and I had the idea to reciprocate the license to Georgia. No fines or disciplinary action ever. But I ran into a little bit of a problem, and I shared it with a few people over the years. That Georgia board, I had served a year of apprenticeship when I was in mortuary school in 1972, and I served a year of apprenticeship in my first job, which was way out west. All right, now, I was a very young man back then, and I got a hankering to go out west, so I served 2 apprenticeships, 2 years. The Georgia board would not accept the apprenticeship period after 38 years. And they made me serve a 2-year apprenticeship. And I did that. I'm going to share this with you. It was one of the most humiliating experiences of my career. However, I did it with good cheer. I did it with good humor. I got a lot of ribbing around the funeral home. And in the middle of my apprenticeship, I was asked to give a seminar on advanced embalming techniques on blood head trauma to the Academy of Graduate Embalmers in Georgia. When I finished my apprenticeship, 3 weeks later, the Georgia board changed the rule that said, if you have a license over 3 years in the state without any charges, you can reciprocate. So when I sent my stuff into Mr. Gribble, there was this lag time, about a 5-year licensed employment. But I was actually teaching some of the apprentices that I was an apprentice. But so that's kind of, and so in the midst of this, I was approached by Stonemore to look at Memphis. And I'm sure I don't need to belabor the time of this august body to belabor Memphis's troubles. And they thought I had something to contribute to maybe reestablishing the reputation of that company, not only in Memphis, but professionally. I'm hoping to help reestablish that reputation within the funeral service profession in Tennessee. And so that's what brings me before your body today.
Are you employed currently?
Yes.
Okay.
Been in there, been at Memphis since June.
Okay. And you're employed by?
Stonewall.
Okay. Which location?
All three.
Okay.
Yeah.
Forest Hill.
Excuse
Okay.
me, yes,
Okay.
Forest Hill.
All right.
The Clayton Smart
Okay.
stuff.
Okay. And Mr. Gribble, is this, would it be correct in saying this is the same situation as what we had last month?
I think that
Very,
would be a
very,
fair-
very similar.
fair statement, yes, sir.
Okay. And of course, it was determined then, I think, especially by legal counsel, that we had, you know, it was our discretion to do what we felt was right. So,
Mr. Van Beck, where were you employed from February 2012 till June of this year?
I was doing a consulting issue for a firm in Dothan, Alabama, and it was a disaster. The young man is in the middle of bankruptcy.
Which of course was funeral related.
Yes, and the young man was in deep waters, and we did not succeed at the task of being able to turn his operation around before he had to file bankruptcy. It was about a 25-week consulting agreement.
And following that same line of questioning, do you recall your employment first half of 2011 between December 31st of 2010 and then when your letter of recommendation from it's your letter stating that catches from July 2011 to February.
What year was that, 210?
From the first 7 months of 2011.
The first 6 months of 2011, I was in Alabama. And then from February...
You were at Ward Wilson from July of that year to February of 12.
Yes. And then from February until the end of May, that's when the Stonewall opportunity came up in Memphis.
But prior to the Ward Wilson?
At Turner's. Yeah.
Chattanooga.
A.S. Turner and Son. I was there right on 7.5 years. For 2 years of that was an apprenticeship.
So you still were working there?
Yes, right. And I was involved. And then in the middle of that, and my mentor in my apprenticeship was Ralph Turner, who was 85 years old. He was the record of state overseeing my...
I did part of my practical for Mr. Turner when I was in mortuary school many years ago.
He was a fine man. He was a fine man.
Well-established firm there.
Very much so.
Motion to approve both applications.
okay, we have a motion to approve both funeral director and embalmers applications by Mr. Hinkle.
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Starkey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Congratulations. Thank you for being
all
here.
for your kind attention and for your time. I appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you for being here.
Mr. Turner is deceased. Yes, Ralph is deceased. He's a good man. Yeah, good man. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
And that Mr. Gribble looks like he's got something else.
I just wanted to mention, we don't have any establishments, and when you make a motion to stop today, it needs to be a motion to recess until 9 a.m. in the morning, not a motion to adjourn.
Okay. And just a reminder, tomorrow's rulemaking is at 9 o'clock, and we'll be over in their sister building.
No. I left. Oh, yeah. 8:30. I've been out on 65.
It's a bad record from 65 early this morning. But let me tell you something.
Building room
It's about 10 minutes before I stay.
We'll be in the Davy Crockett Tower. That's next door.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn.
For recess.
Recess. I'm sorry, I moved that we recess till tomorrow morning
9 a.m. Conference room 160 of the David Crockett Tower.
Second.
All right, have a motion.
Exactly where we're going. Thank you, Mr. President.
I have a motion by Mr. Highsmith and a second by Ms. Taylor to recess till 9 a.m. tomorrow morning at David Crockett Tower. Thank you.
What I want to know is why we can get done by 11 o'clock on the.
This must be a record.